Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Dance Studio Owner Life Coaching. I'm excited today to have Jaclyn Smith on the podcast. And before we started recording, we kind of talked about her journey and what is so important but often overlooked in our industry. So, Jaclyn, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, we were talking about self care and um, how so many people in our industry um, they don't really see another way. And so, if you could share a little bit about who you are, what you do,
Mhm.
and give them a little context about your background before we get started.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I grew up in a dance studio. My family ran a dance studio, so I was kind of indoctrinated young that this was a way of life. And I really loved it, and I still do. I'm no longer working in a dance studio on a day-to-day basis, but it's kind of formed who I am as a person, as a woman. So I'm very grateful to what dance studio life can do for a human. And so when I went to college, I went to Ohio State, I was determined to study dance with the intention of eventually teaching in a dance studio environment. And then fast forward into my adult life, I did a couple of years, about 2.5 years of taking workshops into dance studios. And for that point in my life, I was exploring choreography and teaching. But now in retrospect, I was learning a lot about the different cultures of dance studios across the US, primarily East Coast, from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Ohio, the Denver area. um, and there's a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. And it was kind of an awesome snapshot of different places and how they do things. So then I opened my own dance studio, and kind of a typical story. Started in a strip mall situation. About 10 years in, we expanded into two other spots in that strip mall. A couple of years later, our goal was always like, make sure you have a wait list. So when we would have a wait list, we'd bump through a wall, a wait list, bump through a wall. And then we purchased a 13,000 square foot facility a couple of miles from our first home, and shifted there, and that was to be our permanent home. So we had 6 classrooms, a full-time gym, and we were doing the things that dance studios do and really loving it. The wrench in the plan came in 2021. We were approached by, at the time, our neighbor was a huge government contractor, Lockheed Martin, and they approached us and basically said, you can stay, but here's what we're doing next door. And we weighed all the options and said, do we go back to our strip mall and start again? And my family and I said, no, we're going to do this a little differently. So we closed our studio and kind of shifted our dance teaching faculty and our students to local dance studios. And I started a new journey. So now I am a mental health therapist, finishing state licensure here in New Jersey. And I function within a clinical environment, and then also supporting dance studios and owners, and trying to refocus the from the lessons that I learned in my own experience, how we approach the quality of our work through honest conversations. And a lot of that is burnout prevention and self-care, and self-care in the way that is not bubble baths and long weekends with our girlfriends. Those are temporary relief. We're looking for long-term outcomes for ourselves, and that requires hard work, dirty work.
Yeah, that's really an incredible journey because I think so many people would look at what you did as like, wow, that must have been amazing. That's the
Mhm.
dream. That's so successful to have this big building and do all these different things at 6 classrooms. And oh my gosh, what was it about that experience that maybe people couldn't see from the outside?
It was my dream job. Even Mother's Day, my kids said something like, what is your dream job? And I said, I had my dream job. I had it. I developed it, and I had it with my family. Um, And for everything that is awesome and big and successful, there's a trade off. The trade off for me was the way I cared for myself and my immediate family. And some of that immediate family was also like, you know, friendships and making it home for weddings in the holiday season, but there's a nutcracker to produce. And going to your nephew's graduation, but you've got to resettle that weekend. And missing Mother's Day in Ohio with your mother and your mother-in-law because there's a dance competition. So there was always a trade-off. And while I did it willingly, I noticed that in the first year after we closed down, I was with my children between the hours of 2 and 10 p.m. for the first time in their
Mm.
lives. And
Wow.
I was very lucky that, in those last couple of years, because we had kind of got the wheels in motions at our dance studio, I had the flexibility to say, I'm not working on Wednesday nights. So, I could be home and I could make the dinner and sit down and eat the dinner. But because of our commitment and the huge investment that our family made to the studio, when something happened at the studio that needed my attention, I dropped everything at home and I ran to the studio. And, factor in the things that we all experienced in 2020 during COVID lockdown. We had things moving. We were doing well. I think the fact that our facility was so large and, we had the unique space that there was a huge garage door in every classroom. We could open up and have fresh air. So I could have a certain amount of activity happening in our building that, a lot of other studios couldn't for restrictions that were in place. But again, we didn't have the freedom to prioritize the family. That would have been a new trade-off. If I didn't run to the studio when a drain clogged and one of the toilets was overflowing, somebody else would have to deal with it, right? But I thought, well, it's my responsibility. So I was the one that drove 3 miles, at 9 o'clock at night. And oh, Sally Sue lost her key and she can't lock the door. Oh, I got out of bed and I ran over. So I think the thing that we tell ourselves as owners is this is important and it deserves quality and it deserves attention, and all of that is true. And the dichotomy of this is it comes at a cost sometimes, and you have to either be comfortable with the cost or comfortable with the change. At the time, I was experiencing physical symptoms that turned out to be cancer in my uterus. And I was like, well, I can't take off work to have this procedure. So we're going to push this off. And I kept doing that and doing that and doing that. And you put yourself in this position where like my responsibility and these families and these women that rely on me to take their babies for 45 minutes at 9:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. I was making this dedication the priority. And I kept pushing myself lower and lower on a rung to the point where my health suffered. My marriage is very strong, but at the time it was like we were two ships passing in the night.
Yeah. Yeah.
My husband raised my kids at night because he would get home at 3:30, 4 o'clock, and I was already in a classroom, you know. So it's it's a reality that sometimes if you have the financial stability to not be at your studio all the time, God bless you. But every time we would expand, we would go into that, okay, I'm going to have to teach 9 classes a week to make up for the investment, the financial investment to bust through a new wall and all of that. So there was a trade-off. And it was a hard reality when I was home that first year and my kids were like, that's not the way daddy does that. And I was like,
Oh, ouch.
yeah. I mean, he's the father in our family and
Yeah.
I'm not secondary, but in that moment it was like, oh, we're going to go like this. This isn't the way dad goes to the soccer field. And I was like, oh, brother, I've got to reinsert myself into the daily life of my family.
Yeah. Um, when you were talking about having health things going on, but choosing to delay them, I
Yes.
think that's something that happens often. A
Oof.
lot of the women I talk to say, yeah, my doctor said I need to check out my blood pressure or I need to get blood work. I need to have a mammogram or whatever, and they're putting you off months, months, and months. Is there anything from, I guess, the psychology perspective that would kind of help us understand why we do that? Like, why are we deciding to focus so hard on work in
Yeah,
the name of
sure.
commitment?
Yeah, commitment. I have
Yeah.
to use air quotes for
Yes.
commitment. Well, yes, I personally think there's a couple of things, and there's a spectrum.
Yeah.
There's a spectrum of, I'm not going to call it neglect. I'm going to call it avoidance, where we will say, I don't have time to get to the dentist. Okay, the dentist seems like a every 6 months you go to the dentist for a cleaning.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal if you have to bump it a couple of weeks, but it could be a big deal. Just like missing your pap smear, and I'm speaking from a female's point of view. There are many males that go through some identity and, self-disclosure, and we do these trade-offs as men and as women. But there is a uniqueness to the women's physical and mental experience, particularly in the field of dance studio ownership. And that is often because we bear children and we go through hormonal changes. And a lot of those health things, and God bless dancers, we are tough physical people,
Yeah.
but you will ignore a pain in your foot until it becomes a stress fracture because you can't be bothered with, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but I did it too. We can't be bothered with the time it takes to like take a small break. So we wait until it's a big break and then you're in a boot for 6 weeks. And we see it time and time again. And what is it? I think honestly it comes down to being honest with ourselves. The cost, whether it is financial or it is psychological, the cost of saying, I need you to sub my class for the next 3 weeks because I'm nursing an ankle injury. I'll still come and be present as a voice, or it's little guys and we need that for consistency. That investment of whether it's $75 per person to teach that class for a couple of weeks is probably going to pay you back
Mm.
more than waiting until you're in a boot and you can't drive to the studio, or waiting until you are in the hospital for exhaustion and dehydration and bad nutrition because you did not take care of yourself through competition recital season for 6 years in a row. We see it time and time again. And dancers, again, are so physically tough. The resilience and the tenacity of dancers in general is such that we will push through it. And I love when dancers would come into the studio and say, I went to the doctor and they said I have to stay off my ankle for 6 weeks. And even as a teacher, we'd be like, 6 weeks? You can't do nothing for 6 weeks.
Right.
But, is there a way to lessen the degree to which we push? Yes. It's important that we pay attention to that. And I will say, from a psychological point of view, my concentration is on the neuroscience of movement. So psychomotor therapy teaches us that our body is sending us signals and data all the time. And we have a responsibility to ourselves to listen to the information. And that can be as little as like an anxiety response to something, when you get a tightness or a fluttering in your chest, or your breath changes, or you sweat. That's information. We have a choice to do something with the information, and if we don't, it will probably come back and tell us in stronger signals as we move along. So I think while we are so connected to our bodies, we do ourselves a huge disservice by not honoring the signals and then lying to ourselves like, it'll be fine. This appointment can wait until summer. And now you've got compounding problems, right?
Yeah. Mm.
It's a little bit of self-abandonment. And
Yeah.
I struggle with it a little. I'm working in an environment with a lot of women right now, not dancers specifically, but, and again, I don't want to limit this conversation to the women's experience.
But it's okay
And
if you do, because
yeah,
we dominate this industry. And
we
so many
dominate the industry.
industries that are
Yes,
male dominated,
yes,
dance studio ownership is female dominated.
it
And I
is.
think, if I may, because we've had so many prominent male voices in our mostly female industry,
Mm-hmm.
these topics are not discussed because they don't know what happens in the female experience.
Yes. You took the words right off of my brain. They were floating around in there. Absolutely. And I think it's important. There's also this little, this little nugget of information that I kind of, at a couple of workshops for dance studio owners, it occurred to me that we often want to justify the role that we have to people that don't understand dance studio life. So, you have your sister-in-law who is this prominent person in a corporate field. Great. And you have to make important your job and your role so that they understand that your work is also important. And so we will make it more important in our family. We will give it more time. I have to go to this workshop. I have to do this certification. I have to do all these things to make it not a hobby. I mean, how many of us, most of us, 99% of us were probably dance kids that went on to pursue this in a more professional manner, whether we are degreed or just with experience, then became owners. There's not like a course that you can take in a college environment to be a dance studio owner. It's osmosis. You get exposed to things. Yes, we can be great at business and you can have a degree, you can have a whole bunch of degrees. And dance studio ownership is so nuanced that until you are living it and breathing it, you don't always get it. It doesn't live in a textbook the way physical therapy does. And I think this female experience through this, we carry roles that are unique to our biology. We are helpers, we are caregivers, we are take charge kind of people. We have all of the chemicals in our bodies and our brains to like react in an emergency and like make it happen, right? Makes us excellent stage managers. I'm going to get that quick change on stage in 37 seconds. I'm going to get it because the lion is chasing my baby and I'm going to quick change this baby and push her out on stage. So, there's so many like awesome things that are uniquely female that we practice knowing our bodies so much and then we ignore them. Like it blows my mind. I can say like, oof, I must have eaten something kind of weird. And everybody else is like, what are we talking about? I know my body. 6 hours later, my husband doesn't feel good. But 6 hours ago, I was like, oh, something's not right here because I know my body. I know the sensory parts. I know what's happening, my muscles. You can feel it. And yet I've become so accustomed to sensations and feelings and pain that I'm like, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's like a 2. I'm probably fine.
You said we get to know our bodies so well and then we ignore them. Ooh,
Oof. Yeah.
wow.
Uh, yeah.
That is so true.
Yeah. I I've been studying now. I'm working in a clinical environment for people in substance use recovery, early recovery. And one of the things that I am focusing on right now in this population is women who have not felt physical sensations for a long time because they have muted physical sensations with substance. Now, substance use and dance studio ownership are not on the same page. However, there is a behavior associated with drive and I got to go, I got to get it, I got to fix it, I've got to numb it, I've got to ignore it, I've got to push it later in my calendar. There are some similarities to, dare I say, the addictive behavior of driving towards the big goal as dancers and dance artists and studio ownership that like I can only get 2 hours of sleep tonight because I've got a big show to produce tomorrow. I can only do, we have this in us. And those again, I go back to those sensations give us information. The neuroscience of movement tells us we are excellent at turnout and grand plie because we practiced it 10,000 times. And then when it comes to like the grand plie is telling me that my groin is weak or I've got an injury, we're like, it's probably fine.
Yeah.
Well, I can't miss ballet bar. I can't sub out. I can't. So the paradox of like getting so good at knowing ourselves to know ourselves and then we replace it with ignoring. It's something that I wish I had paid better attention to as a young person to teach my young students and teachers. And now as an older woman, I'll say like, "Ah, your body's like tapping you on the shoulder. You've got a headache because you're super malnourished because you haven't been eating except out of a Tupperware for the last 6 days in between class
Yeah.
breaks. Like stop holding your bladder. Ask somebody to stand in your doorway and watch your little guys and run to the bathroom.
Why is it always holding the bladder?
Oh,
This is literally the conversation I have with my staff. And I will
yeah,
say, stop talking and go to the bathroom.
right, right.
It's so common.
Yeah.
Um, what was the point where you realized enough is enough?
Hmm. To close my studio or to like reinvest in myself. They're probably both. They probably happen at the
Yeah,
same time.
I would say both.
Yeah. Well, the short story is when we were coming back to in-person classes after COVID lockdown,
Right.
and I was standing at my desk in my studio, and a person from Lockheed Martin walked into my office and slid this piece of paper across my desk. And my office manager, who's my dearest friend in the whole world, she was the manager of the studio and did everything that I wasn't doing, she was doing, and vice versa. We were like left hand, right hand. She came over to me and she put her hand on my shoulder, and we're looking at this document and it had all this legalese on it. And it's not my first rodeo, but this person said, I just need you to sign this real quick and then and I was like, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah.
And she put her hand on my shoulder and she was like, we'll get back to you, to this person. We took the paper, and that was the beginning of this process to figure out like what are they doing and why am I being invited to leave or stay, and it kick-started for me and my family again the trade-off. Now, we had just gone through COVID lockdown. We had been very successful and God bless stable, where a lot of people were losing their businesses and
Yeah.
their,
Yeah.
the stability because COVID-19 put us in a somersault. We were good. We came back into in-person classes and had an increase in our enrollment. So we were okay. But I had had this time to kind of reevaluate. My body rested. Like you can only do so many things from your living room on your laptop when you're teaching. We
Right.
had we had gotten really crafty, but the other part about it was we were dancing and moving and being together for the sake of dancing and moving and being together.
Hmm.
And I love a good show, love recitals. We were not a super heavy competition school, but we would do a lot of work with like Dance Device Lab came to our studio a couple of times a year where we were doing things to give our kids access to information and people. And a lot of kids were on the dance team at high school. Like we had things moving.
Yeah.
And then when you take all of those hard deadlines away, which are external deadlines, when you
Right.
take all of that away and you're just moving because you get to be together, and you're
Mm.
just creating a dance because the song is so brilliant, but you have no stage to put it on. Nobody was doing anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
The joy in that, which is why eventually I pivoted into clinical mental health, the joy in that, the ability to express the bonds among my students and my teachers got stronger.
Mm.
And that was the beginning of like, my knees haven't hurt for 3 months. Huh.
Mm. Yeah.
Can't believe I used to come home on a Tuesday night after teaching 4 tap classes and ice the backs of my knees before I could go to sleep.
Wow.
Okay, what is this telling me? And
Hmm.
then my husband and I put it on paper. Do we go back to a strip mall? What do we do with 22 employees and 516 students? What do we do with these people? We can't just
Yeah.
be like, well, we're out. So we kept figuring out, well, how can we do this that honors all of these people and our family's investment? And that was the beginning of saying, where's the trade off?
Yeah.
Do I go back to the Jaclyn show where I'm the only one that shows up and teaches 5, 6 hours in a one-room dance studio again, like I did 20 years prior?
Yeah.
Or do I pivot and do this a different way? And I have the studio families with us were exceptional, and the community at large was exceptional. Like other dance studios were very supportive and kind, and
Yeah.
they didn't have to be. They're good
Right.
humans. They offered to help us, to take kids and faculty, and the whole nine yards. The women stepped forward and said, you'd show up like this. They were like, you need to take a break. Are you okay? And
Yeah.
there was this constant support from women. And I have always felt this is such a female dominated field, that like the sisterhood is so strong, and the motherhood. Women that are older than you, that you've never been around, can put their arm
Hmm.
around you and say, I did this once,
Yeah.
and here's how it's going to go. And I'm
Yeah.
going to show you and learn from you. That was the pivot point for me. I would have to trade myself, my identity that I had worked and worked and worked and worked and worked to be a certain way. And then when you take that building away, I still have to be here. Where do I go? That was it. I said, I've got to be fool for me, so that I can be fool for all of these people. And 18 months of fighting with a global contractor can strip a lot of you away. So I said, I've got to be me again. And that's where it changed. Being fully me, I am trying to communicate with other people, other women, to say, you're not going to get a prize if you give and never take care of yourself. It's,
Right.
there's no trophy at the end of this. Your family will lose you if you aren't full. Your students will lose you if you aren't full. Your creativity will, if you're not full. Like, they're all the
Right.
things that make us who we are. You sacrifice that when you give beyond your capacity.
Yeah. Hmm. You brought up so many good points. And um, I think that when you talked about just having that time, like COVID recovery, of feeling what it was like to just express yourself for the sake of expressing yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and realizing, oh, wait, this doesn't hurt anymore,
Yeah.
like physical things. It's a good reminder to us that, in your case, you had, what do you say, 22 staff?
Yes.
Um, I think sometimes we don't even lean on our staff
Oh,
to support us so that we can live our dream. Um, is there anything for someone listening, anything you would say to them about what's kind of a first step?
mm.
Um, if they feel like, what, this is really hitting a chord for me. How do I start to change that for my life? Is there anything you would offer as like a first step?
Yes. I think returning to the core of, people say it in it's like an Instagram meme, what's your why? But I
Mm-hmm.
think as a dance artist, I lost my why. My why became filling classrooms. And
Yeah.
my why at my core was dancing and self-expression and performance and creation. And those things were present. But, if we were looking at, like, a bar chart, my creativity and self-expression was lower than my administrative role, than my, marketing, than my whatever. The leadership of my people, to make sure that they have the tools that they need, is an important part. And I lost my own why. And I think returning to that, which can be as simple as, like, I've started going to a gym that is not uh, group fitness like the way that we were doing it before. So
Yeah.
that was very familiar and comfortable for me. I got myself really uncomfortable, and I go to a different kind of a gym, and I'm working with a trainer who is excellent. And she will say, let's look at that again. It looks like you're favoring one side over the other. Getting correction turns back my self awareness, turns it back on. Taking a pottery class, and people will say, I don't have time for this. I don't have money for this. Well, yeah, I think, like, we have so much of our output is for the general administration of our work and everybody else's needs. But we have to have the right kind of input to feed our soul, which sounds so cliche,
Yeah.
but like that's why bubble baths are just short-term relief, right? A bubble
Yeah.
bath is great for 30 minutes, and then the
Yeah.
water gets cold and you got to like get going.
Yeah.
We need a little bit of identity work, and the identity work can be as simple as sitting down at night and saying, you know, we do to-dos. In our a lot of our group work, we'll do a to-do list, not a to-do list. My to-do list is I helped somebody today.
Yeah.
My to-do list is I sat down and read an entire chapter of a book without being interrupted. I mean, these sound like little things, but dance studio owners, you don't have 35 minutes in the sunshine with a cup of hot coffee to read a book, but you have to make time. And those little simple things, that self identity work will reconnect you with who you are. We are not labels. I am a studio owner. That's a label. I am a mother. That's a combination of role and identity and label. I am strong. I am fearful. I am committed. Those are the parts of us that will help us make decisions for ourselves, for our families, for our studios. When we get stuck in the label, I am an award winning choreographer. That is beautiful. That's a beautiful accomplishment. And it's a label. So I think shifting from the label
Right.
of our identity is an important part of not abandoning ourselves. And that identity work starts with truth, dirty work, like quiet time. When your partner says, I'm really having a hard time talking to you recently, you're so strung out that everything is defensive. Instead of saying, you don't know how many things, right? You stop and you say, okay, yeah, I've been freaking out at the kids in the morning when they don't leave on time. I've been, ticked off when I get home and the chicken breast that I put in the back of the fridge was eaten and nobody asked. Like I'm ticked off about things all the time, or I'm short-tempered or whatever. If you're the people that love you most, those are the people that are going to be with you. When those kids in your studio graduate, they go on to their own lives. They'll check in, they're lovely, but they're not going to come to your bedside when you're feeling unwell and say, I love you, mom. Your kids are,
Mm.
your family will.
Wow.
Staying late
Yeah.
at work, those people aren't going to be like, thank God you stayed late at work for the last 24 years.
No.
But your family's going to be like, yeah, you missed it. You weren't here. I mean, it sounds kind of silly. It sounds kind of cliche, but cliches exist for a reason too. Like
Right.
the memes that we see every day on social media, they exist for a
Right.
reason.
Right.
I think the identity work is where it starts, and it's the dirty truth. Like, what can I did this exercise yesterday with someone. We wrote on a note card a truth that I have to acknowledge about myself. We flipped it over and said, okay, if you were an outsider looking at you and acknowledging this truth, what what are the things that contribute to that lie that you're telling yourself? So I need chaos. It's a thrill. Or you flip it over and it's like, I think you're uncomfortable with the quiet because now you have to figure out what's happening around you without constant stimulation. I think that is part of the dirty work. And that is honesty. And it is hard to be honest with yourself when you don't give yourself any time.
Yeah. Hmm. So, if someone was interested in learning more about what you do and possibly working with you, how can they find you online?
Sure. I have a website, movewellmindbody.com. And I have a very limited social media presence. It's not my favorite place to be. I do a little bit of neuroscience of movement on Instagram at Unpacked with Jack, JAC. And I, talk a little bit about like what happens when we move and how it benefits us in terms of mental health and life balance. On my website, I talk a little bit about my identity as a therapist and how my experiences have shaped me. I work with a lot of teams, youth teams, high school teams. I work with a lot of studios, and I function to support with what you have happening. I will listen and help guide you through it. I'm not the expert in your life. You are the expert in your life. But sometimes an outsider's point of view can say, have you ever considered this other thing and how might this benefit you? My job is to walk beside you and help guide you to maybe some solutions, but it's important work, I think, for women to support other women and bring to light the things that we know are there, but we sometimes overlook and neglect.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. The links that she mentioned will be in the show notes so that you can get to the website, get to the Instagram to learn more. Thank you so much for joining us.
You. It's a pleasure to see you today.